Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the New Scholars Committee for giving me an opportunity to talk about this community library. I would also like to thank community members who have let me talk about this to a more wider public. So particularly Dinshaw Avari, whose name is up there, not up there, but talking about the colony itself, the settlement that I will talk about, the librarian Cyrus Doctor, and my dissertation committee members, Walter Huckala and Damien Keane. In addition, I just want to say it's an honor to be presenting amongst Jessica and Javeria. Thank you so much. So for my dissertation, I'm currently thinking about how memory in the Zoroastrian diaspora is represented in different texts and institutions, comparing Zoroastrian and Parsi literary works with oral histories and community archives. Specifically in order to think through Zoroastrian repositories of narrating our history, as well as main community themes of migration, reformism, and a lot of anxieties about a dying population. And so in particular, I've been working with the materials at the Dastur Dr. Dhalla Collection. So my main goal for today is to introduce you to this small and unique collection of materials that pertain to Zoroastrian history, specifically in South Asia and specifically in Pakistan, and that sits in a small and not frequently visited community library in Karachi. So a quick historical note. Zoroastrians, they are an ethno-religious minority, and they follow the teachings of Prophet Zarathustra and are currently widely known in communities of Iran, India, Pakistan, and North America. I will use the term Parsi interchangeably as it is popularly used for Zoroastrians who are the descendants and settled in India after the 8th and 10th centuries onwards. So, the Dastur Dr. Dhalla Collection lives in a small library amongst a combination of collections in an affluent and one of the last living Zoroastrian settlements in Karachi, Pakistan, called the Dinshaw Avari Colony. This library is referred to by two different names because it holds two important collections. Of course, the first is the Dastur Dr. Dhalla Collection, and then the second is the Young Men's Zoroastrian Association Collection. Both the collections were first housed in another Zoroastrian settlement in an older part of the city. The older part of the city is called Sadr, and the settlement was called Katrak Hall. However, shortly after Dastur Dhalla's passing away, and the fear of Katrak Hall soon becoming an emptier settlement, the collections were moved to this particular colony. So the threat of losing a physical repository, especially with Pakistan state politics, and to do with minority communities especially being threatened, the nature of the community's population decline and resources, this collection was combined with other collections of famous Parsi writers and other famous Zoroastrian groups. So as we see on the map, this itself on the right image is the border of the settlement itself, and then zoomed into, which really is not a good printout here, but you can see that the green is where the library is located, and the building is called Shezdega. I will talk a little bit more about that. In the blue circle is the Tower of Silence, which is still to this day being used, and then a fire temple where the prayers for the morning and funerary services happen, which is in the red circle there. Okay. Okay, so the location of the current collection is quite important to note. The Shezdega building, it is adjacent to the Tower of Silence, and it is where primary funeral services happen. The Shezdega building itself is subsidized housing for Kandiyas and Nasisalas, who are members of the community. But these two names refer to two types of corpse bearers who are hired to take care of funeral rites, transporting the dead to the Tower of Silence and cleaning and maintaining the Tower of Silence. Furthermore, because of the building and the Tower of Silence and the temple, this area is typically frequented by Zoroastrians for funerary services only, and sometimes for other type of prayers, but not so often anymore. But why am I talking about this? And it's really important here to note, and kind of still a taboo subject in my community, but it is the Kandias and Nasisalas who do take care of the cleaning are adjacent and seen as adjacent to lower caste members of the community. And this is an influence arising since the migration of Zoroastrians from Iran to India, particularly being influenced within Hinduism and particularly in Gujarat. So with 1,000 or less Zoroastrians left in Karachi, the challenges that come from the decline in population and various other anxieties, as well as the dire want to keep ancient traditions alive, there are changes being made to address the casteism and the boundaries of cleanliness and purity. But few in number, and this is because of participant interviews and oral histories that I've collected, do say, and one can easily deduce, that the Parsis living, especially in the colony, are reluctant to visit the library and use it. And it is primarily because of who lives there and what is conducted in this area. And because most items are non-circulating, the repository can be accessed more like an archive. Less patrons want to visit this area of the settlement. Before I get into the details of the library itself and the collection itself, which is 1,000 or so in volume, let me tell you who Dastur Dr. Dhalla was and means to the Zoroastrian community at large. His full name, Dastur as in priest, Manekchi Nasarvanji Dhalla, was born in Surat, India in 1875 and died in Karachi, Pakistan in 1956. He completed his doctorate in Iranian languages and Sanskrit at Columbia University in 1908, and that is not a common thing for Zoroastrian priests to go out to a public school in that sense to study Avastan languages. They go to their own kind of religious schools in India and Pakistan. And Dhalla studied under Abraham Jackson, who was a specialist of Avastan, which is the language used in Zoroastrian scriptures. After that, Dhalla moved back to Pakistan, and he was appointed the high priest of the Parsis in Karachi, and later on received the honor of Shams Ulema, which means the son of scholars or theologians, by the British government, a title which is given typically to influential leaders within their communities. Now, it's also important to mention there's an amazing history of Parsis in printing press. They were early adopters of the printing press in India. They've written, published, and printed, and especially funded a lot of printing presses and countless newspapers, journals, magazines, and writing, especially on the Zoroastrian religion. It was their main way to comment about the future of Zoroastrians, reform, changes in traditions such as conversion, interfaith marriages, as well as the role of women in the liturgy. And it is important to note that because the priests were only taught about the Avastan and religious scriptures, this was for the common Zoroastrian to kind of publish and write about their own religion through the printing press. So very interesting discussions there that happen. Dhalla, like his previous counterparts, he also founded a journal and a magazine in his earlier career, and the journal that he founded and is well known for was founded in 1902 and called Zartoshti, which means Zoroastrian in Gujarati. Dhalla extensively has published in English and Gujarati as well, and you're going to find this in his collection and what he collected. So to access the library, one follows a road path to a door with a plaque that says Dastur Dr. Dhalla Library, relocated on 18th November 2000 at Dinshaw Avari Colony. The collection itself shows Dhalla's collecting practices, so really picking up on Zoroastrian theology, history, literary works by Parsis, as well as materials on the history of Pakistan, specifically Sindh, which is a very interesting choice for a Zoroastrian community library, and I can get into it later if you have questions about that, as well as works gifted to Dhalla by various organizations and leaders, but specifically things he collected himself. One can find old editions of Dickens and other British literature as well, which is quite reminiscent of Parsi Anglophilia, which to this day lingers on. The library houses itself 4,000 plus items from various collections, but the Dhalla collection itself dates from the late 1700s onwards, mainly to the 19th and 20th century. And so you do find a lot of rare edition and other format-based books on the subcontinent, religious studies, mathematics, linguistics, particularly in languages of English, Gujarati, Avastan, Pahlavi, and Farsi. Even though its usage is minimal, especially at this moment, its movement is not. Recently, part of the collection was gifted to the Zoroastrian Association of Houston Library in Sugarland, Texas, where it will be cataloged and available for community members and Zoroastrian associations from around North America to check out. And it's mainly because of concerns of preservation and conservation that they're being moved, because I'll get into that later. So this is just one item that I picked out and I would argue is a rare collectible and find that illustrates the diversity and rarity found within the collection. The book is entitled Genealogical Trees of the 9 Families of the Athornan Section of Udwada. It is published and printed in Surat at the Jane Vea Printing Press. It was opened in 1925 and still present to this day. And I selected this copy to put particular emphasis on Parsi genealogy, as it is its own genre of literature in Gujarati, which establishes the chronology of individuals not only registering important rituals that Zoroastrians went through, even registers of their death dates, but also of family trees known as YMZAs, particularly of Zoroastrian priestly lineages. Dr. Daniel Sheffield, in his extensive work on primary sources in Persian and Gujarati, shared that many of these documents remain in manuscript form. But some examples have been published and reprinted for circulation. And so here is an example that has been reprinted and gifted to Dhalla, and showcases the value given to recording family trees from the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s. As the inscription on the verso side tells us, this copy was gifted to Dhalla from Dinshaw Unwala, who was a descendant of Naushirwan Unwala, on January 15th, 1926. Its most interesting and beautiful elements are the lino cuts made by N.N. Unwala himself, with its intricate and unique design for the family trees, ornamentation, framing, portraits, vibrant inks, and the use of the Parsi Gujarati dialect. What is more important to note about this copy is that it lives in Karachi, Pakistan, and not Surat, India, nor in the famous Zoroastrian library of Navsari, the first Dastur Mehri Rana library known for scholars to visit and do research at. And this emphasis, I note, has a complex politics behind it, especially when thinking about the ethical, but most importantly, the political dimensions of preservation, restoration, and access to these materials. And there's a lot more to say about that, but it is really beautiful. I'm sure while introducing this example, you've noticed other elements that tell a material story in these scanned pages, and that is the physical condition of these rare books. Both the verso and recto sides show signs of bookworms and foxing due to the lack of resources allocated to the library, the condition of the bookshelves and the placement of the items. Other items in the Dhalla collection, like this one, the Memorandum of Association and Rules of Iranian Zoroastrian Anjuman of Bombay, 1941, is just one of many binding copies that need repair and attention. In addition to the materials found in this repository, the catalogs detailing and trying to record what is still there, what is not, what was discarded and why, helps to understand the ongoing struggles and stresses of maintaining a community-centered collection in Karachi. So we can look at each item, we can see what many different transcribers, translators, catalogers have kind of tried to record on these catalog registers. And so they each tell interesting narratives about social and religious history of Zoroastrianism, particularly within the province of Sindh in Pakistan, but also it is interesting for a Pakistani to come sit here and look at books that were printed in India, and now you cannot cross the border to do it so easily. But then you get to learn about all the places of worship and Tower of Silence structures across India that you might not get to see as a community member. One specific focus, however, that I am interested in stays true to the representation of who Dr. Dhalla was, and particularly his collecting practices within this collection, as well as record keeping. And that is his second-generation reformist position. And reformism and Zoroastrianism, and just a very quick spiel about it, is still a very interesting and controversial subject among community members. Some older generations do not agree with the approach of how Zoroastrianism is now taught to the youth or to the public in general. However, Dhalla really started this movement as a second-generation priest in that. So the catalog points to his collecting choices, in which we tend to find multiple pamphlets, commentaries, and format-based books in which the focus is on approaching Avastan texts with a historical perspective. And with understanding language and the grammar of Avasta, labeling certain texts such as the Gathas, which are hymns written by Prophet Zarathustra, as the beginning and the start to where we see putting a historical perspective on Zoroastrianism. And so he followed scholars like James Moulter, who tends to focus on a historical perspective on Zoroastrianism. So we find his name repeatedly collected and seen in the catalog records here, because Dhalla was really inspired by his work. And we can go into, I think his study in Columbia University was also very influential there. The next slide, I don't have much to say, but more to show. But you can see kind of the state of the bookshelves and how the books are packed, and the physical library itself. Remember that, Karachi is a very summer all year long, so lots of dust, lots of heat, temperature issues, which we do not use the resources for and put across there, okay? So there is a lot more to say, look through at the Dhalla library, and for me to do the work, especially. But the community members are right now working on digitizing the collection and what can be opened and digitized. And so even though the future of the repository might not be in a physical space, hopefully there will be a space on the internet. And that's really because in the next decade or so, most probably the settlement will not exist, and most probably Zoroastrians will not be in Pakistan anymore. And so this is just one part of sharing this public history with you. And so thank you so much for listening to it. And I welcome any questions and comments and feedback, especially about this library. Thank you.